Well, hello everyone, and welcome yet again to another edition of the Presence Posse Presents. And I have with me, or we are at the moment, Dr. Fred Blum, and I'm Miriam Siegel. And Fred brought his heart with him today. That's very nice. And we will be joined shortly by Bobby Cobb, who is off in Alaska doing fun things. I'm going to I have no idea what he's doing. I just thought I'd throw that in there.
He's in Alaska. That part we know.
He's definitely in Alaska, yeah. We are talking today about presence practices. It just so happens that presence practices is Fred's suggestion for a topic. So I just thought I would put all the responsibility on him. But now here's Bobby to join us.
Yeah, Bobby's here, saved by the Bobby.
Bobby's here, and he's also in blue.
So it's a like blue day.
Hi, Bobby.
Bobby's in blue and white, representing both of us.
I'm the harmonizer of the group. I bring people together.
Is that not a true statement?
And actually, you're sitting perfectly in your picture, so it looks like your head is like a mountain cap beside the mountain.
It's weird when your hand disappears there.
Yeah, that's true. Perfectly framed.
My green skin.
Right.
More deep breathing. Good thing we're talking about techniques today.
That's right.
You'll do the hand. Yeah, I'm gonna go send it to you now. As I said, Fred, we're talking about presence practices. And well, that could be basically anything to do with presence, I guess. But did you have anything in particular in mind when you suggested it?
You know, I didn't have when I suggested it. So we were messaging with each other. Maybe it was earlier this week or last week. And what should we do next week? Because we've gone through so many presence topics now. We've done this for over a year. So that means we've got 50 plus things. I mean, I guess one presence practice could just be go back and watch some of those episodes.
Yeah.
Although that was not the practices I had in mind for today. I like short, simple things that we can do in our lives. So the kind of presence practices that I'm thinking of are not the ones that require that you block an hour from your schedule and have no distractions, and you're going to sit in lotus position for an hour. And I think those practices are wonderful and awesome. What I've mostly done is just design practices around my probably most defining feature, which is laziness, such that, I can do them without a lot of preparation and time. And they work. That's the other part of it. They're designed to bring us quickly to a place of presence rather than have to, kind of go through all the other rituals and everything else. Here's one other piece about that I think is useful is when you get the hang of this, when you begin to see that there is like some kind of understanding of what we're doing, then you could just make it up. You could just kind of invent a practice in the moment that somehow seems to work for you. And then, that's when it really becomes portable, where you can do them anywhere, anytime. So I'll give you an example. And this is one I made up today, speaking with a client, and she needed a little bit of settling down before we could get into some real work. So, and let's all, this will be fun. Let's all do the practices together when we do them.
Yay.
Okay.
The audience at home, and eventually we'll just stop speaking because we'll be so. Anyway, I'll come up with one, then you guys, throw some in there too. But here's what I did with her today. So just wherever you are in the moment, just become aware of the space in the room. So normally when we look around a room, we go from object to object, don't we? So now just be aware of the space in the room. And we'll do that for maybe 10 or 15 seconds, whatever you like. And then become aware of the space inside your body. And notice that although the space in your body appears separate from the space in your room, because we have this boundary that we're, using called the skin, can you begin to notice that the space in the room and the space in the boundary is really continuous? And so just have that sense that the space in the room, the space in my body. And maybe now we could even add the space in your mind, like the space between the thoughts. And can we see once again that the space in our mind, the space in the room, and the space in the body is all one continuous space? And just notice whatever you notice about that, however that maybe shifts your perception or experience in this moment. And does it hopefully bring you a little more present, since these are called presence practices? And so how long did that take? Maybe a minute, minute and a half?
I didn't time it, but something like
No.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, you tell me, was that helpful? Did it cause some kind of a shift?
Yeah, it did in me. I mean, just, directing the attention purposefully and taking the thing that you nailed for me is, even though you said check out the space in the room, I was doing what we are conditioned to do, which is the reason that your prompt was so amazingly effective, because I'm looking at my camera, then I'm looking at the wall behind the computer, I'm checking out the lights, I'm checking out everything except
In the space, right?
The space, right? I'm checking out the content of the space, where what your invitation actually was to check out the space itself. So that for me was a pattern interrupt.
Mm.
And when you introduced this topic, I thought, oh man, this is so perfect, because we really, as you said, Fred, anything will work. Any practice will get us there. But the one thing that we have so much practice at is getting lost in the perceived reality, the content of what is around us, the content of awareness, as opposed to the awareness itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
I think that there's like some kind of conditioning in our brain, like survival level conditioning that, hello, Malcolm, that says we have to focus on the things in our environment because that's the stuff that can eat us. So
Yeah,
the space isn't that relevant for survival in the sense that we're looking at it here. So we really do. We tend to go from thing to thing to thing, and including ourselves, we become a thing. And so to focus on space is a really unusual act. And I think, hopefully most of these practices, the intent is that they kind of impact our nervous system in some way, and they begin to shift that kind of the way we habitually operate. Does anybody else have one?
Yeah, well, I'll layer. Actually, I'd like to layer two on to that, and both are super simple and easy. The first one is a purposeful pattern interrupt, And when I start working with a new coaching client, I introduce them to this idea, which is just setting a timer on your smartphone for a countdown and have it interrupt you, and just take a pause to notice where you are and when you are and how you are. We are constantly asking each other, hey, how you doing? How was your weekend? What do you got planned for the week? You know, how's life unfolding? But we very rarely check in with ourselves. So a simple one that I like to do, particularly somebody who's new to the concept of mindfulness practice or presence practices, is just to begin to notice how automatically and how in accordance with our conditioning we live our life. You know, we can sleepwalk our way through our day pretty effortlessly and easily. So just having that alarm going off and stop and checking in and noticing, are you feeling anxious, angry, frustrated? Not necessarily that any of those are bad emotions, and I do talk about that later, that they don't inherently have any meaning other than the meaning that we give to it. But just where are you on a scale? So if one is you're the Buddha and you're in a Zen temple and you're the perfect presence practitioner at the moment, and 99 is I got to get the hell out of here and I got to run and I got to meditate or medicate or go work out or do whatever it is when you crawl into a fetal position and just let the world pass you by. Where are you on that scale? And playing around with that, I found for just a couple of days gets people to realize, man, we're all over the place. We're all over the place in that we can be up at 90 and then down at 19 and then back at 59 and bouncing all over the place from one session to the next. And we're all over the place time-wise, thinking about how we could have handled an interaction this weekend a little bit better, worried about, do we have everything that we need for the big meeting that we've got coming up on Wednesday, and very little of how we're doing right now. So if you don't like that number that you get, if you feel like, I'm a little anxious right now, the second thing is just to notice your breath. So I'll offer you guys the invitation to do that as well. Just begin to pay attention to your breathing. Notice where you are, inhaling or exhaling. And then just take conscious control of that, meaning just breathe a little bit longer. Breathe in a little bit longer than you normally do when you're on fully automatic. And breathe out, empty your lungs a little bit more than you do when you're in fully automatic. And just follow that for a moment. It can be 3 seconds, 5 seconds. It may take a little bit longer for you to feel the calming down. But my experience has been that does set a little trigger in us. It's like it sends a message to our internal pharmacy and our nervous system, and eventually to every cell in our body. Just taking control of the breath sends a signal. Oh, okay, we're supposed to be calming down now. We're supposed to be relaxing. We're supposed to be lighting up our parasympathetic nervous system and getting those good feel-good chemicals released into our bloodstream. And playing around with that, and I've taken over 100 people through that process, and it normally takes about, on the short end, 7 to 10 days, on the long end, about 30 to 35 days for presence to start to feel normal, to the point where when anxiousness or anxiety or something else pops up in us, that can now be the ringing smartphone. You can just say, oh, what's going on there? Where am I? What am I doing? What am I paying attention to? Where is my attention? And then if you don't like the answer that you get, now you've got another thing to do, and you can do what Fred did. You can do whatever Miriam might introduce here in a moment, whatever works for you to just help you relax into the moment, into the present moment.
So just checking in, basically.
Yeah, checking in. And if you don't like the answer that you get, you know, our so often our tendency, our conditioning is power through, no pain, no gain, fake it till you make it, suck it up, you've got this. And all of that is teaching us to push down our emotions and the wisdom that we're getting from our body. And as we take conscious control of our breath, we can send a signal to, hey, we're in control here, and we can relax into this moment. And if you do that as a practice, it pretty quickly, you know, even on the long end, 30 to 40 days, that's a relatively short period of time for something that can have you living a little bit more in harmony with life and the way it unfolds.
Right.
Miriam, how about you?
Thank you. I was just going to say that's the beauty of these short practices. You can do them basically anywhere without anybody knowing. and
Right.
if you manage to do, you know, a short practice for a minute and a half, and who doesn't have that? It takes you that long to go to the bathroom often.
Yeah.
So you can do that. You can do these kinds of practices even then, and get into the habit of that and reminding your body that I'm present and I'm safe and everything's fine. And even when I'm present and things around me aren't necessarily safe, I'm present. So I know, I will likely know what's best for me to do in this very moment because I'm here. Kind of sewing them together. I was just noticing, Fred, when you talked about noticing space, and I love that because it was like the speed slowed down I mean, we were joking a little bit at the beginning and everything, and we have to, you know, make it at 9 o'clock and we're a couple of minutes over and all of that. So the speed is a little bit up, and then just noticing space and everything just slowed down. And there was space between what you were saying as well, like what you're asking us to do, and then you're leaving space. And so your speaking was also very slow. And I love that about my experience of being present is it's often very, very slow. And I can be moving very quickly. My boyfriend calls me one speed woman because I walk really fast. And but I can walk really fast and feel slow if I'm present. So just to make the distinction, and you were mentioning about sitting in lotus position, I have people who think that's what presence practice is always being quiet and always meditating, that sort of thing. You can be in a meditative state or a present state doing pretty much everything. So it's not about sitting and not talking and never feeling uncomfortable, and people, you know, at least I can generalize people who I've spoken with in some form or other will think it's okay to have the good feelings, but it's not okay to have the so-called bad feelings.
All right.
And so if they're present and they've got this mindfulness thing down and all of that, they think that, oh, well, they're just not going to be mad anymore or sad anymore or whatever. But it's okay to laugh and be happy. And if you listen to anybody like Eckhart Tolle and Adyashanti and all of these sort of, I don't want to call them experts, but they've been doing presence work for a long time. They'll be like, yeah, happy, sad, it's all emotion. So, you know, if you're present, it doesn't really matter what emotions. It's not about avoiding. Presence isn't about avoiding uncomfortable emotions. It's giving space to them when they're there so that they don't own you. You own them. And actually nothing really, metacognitive people will say, it's just, you don't engage with them even. You just let them, they're there. They pass by. Thoughts are there. They pass by. But, and just to tie something you said earlier about focusing on things, we often focus on things. There's a way if you're one of those people who's used to focusing on things, and I invite you to do this now, there's a way to use that to your advantage. If you experience going from focusing on lots of things and doing lots of things and lots of high tempo, high speed, if you find that it's too far a leap to go to space from all of that, because that can feel really uncomfortable as well. It's that sort of, well, now I'm doing nothing. And that can even feel dangerous for some people, is space and quiet. It's almost like the calm before the storm for some people in their bodies. You can have a transition where I invite you to do this, just to notice how many lamps are in the room. So get present to what's in the room. How many chairs are in the room? How many windows are in the room? Are there blinds or curtains on the window? If there's a window? What color? And if there are blinds, are they up and down or side to side? Open or shut? Where are you sitting in the room right now? And what's that like? And here I'll mention that I go from noticing outer to noticing inner. Where am I sitting? Then I'd go to where I'm oriented in the room. And then what's it like? What's that like to sit where I am? So what are the sensations you have in your body? What are the sensations you have in connection with the chair or the couch? Or maybe you're standing. Your shoes. And even more inward. What's it like to be you here with us right now? What's it like to be you here with us right now? And just notice. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to change it. Nothing wrong with it or even right with it. It just is. Just notice and let it be. Just that. Just what is. And that's a kind of presence practice that also can be done anywhere. I'm waiting for a bus. And what's it like to be me here waiting for the bus right now? And just notice, what's it like to be me? Because again, with Fred in the outer, it's noticing everybody. We're often trained for that. And especially, I would dare to say women, we're often trained to notice everybody else. And be focused on what we have to do instead of how we are and what it's like to be us. And it's very quick, again, just to notice, what's it like to be me right now? What's in me right now? And if I take it even further to make a relation, I like working in relation to other people, in relation to myself. What do you notice when you look at me? What do you see? And be completely concrete about what you notice. So if you think, for example, I notice a nice smile. Nice is kind of a judgment. It's an opinion. It's not concrete. You see what I mean? So what do you notice? Exactly what do you notice? And for those of you watching, you're welcome to put something in the comments about that. What do you notice? And if you're watching later, you're more than welcome to put something in the comments. What do you notice? And notice in you. Are you afraid to write something? What's going on with you right now? Are you afraid to tell me? For whatever reason, did you notice something that you don't like? Did you notice something you do and you don't want me to know? Just notice. Nothing wrong with it again. You don't have to change anything. Just notice. And you can do that again anywhere with anything, anybody. You may not tell them, but notice what's going on with you here with me right now. What do you notice? So let's see. Somebody says feelings want to move. Anybody want to say anything about that?
Well, it reminds me of the breakdown of the word emotion as energy in motion. That I agree. Somebody has some comment about your hair and things.
Ah, can I play with that? I don't know who you are.
You are fancy.
Thank you so much for commenting. I love that.
Sorry, we don't know what your names are because it's this weird thing with StreamYard that you have to register. So we just see Facebook user.
Yeah.
But if you'd like to share who you are with the comments, it'd be, if we know who you are, it'd be nice to know who you are.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for saying that, Fred. In order for us to see who you are, you need to just go into StreamYard and register your name, and then it will come up automatically when you write comments. So whoever you are, Facebook user, thank you very much for your comment.
It may be more than one Facebook user.
Could be more than one.
No.
We seem to have several here.
Yeah.
Fancier.
Fancier.
And normal. Just curious.
And more
I'm just
open.
curious about what does that mean? And it's Rosalie. And an openness. Openness, what does that mean? How concrete can you be? So this is, again, there's nothing right or wrong with anything here. So notice what's happening when I'm speaking, what you feel, what reactions you might have to what I'm mentioning. Fancier than normal. Is that concrete? And openness, is that concrete? And can it be more concrete? What do you notice? So this is like a game. It can be really fun. And if you chose to take it personally, just notice that. Because that's happening. And we're human, aren't we? So what's the thought behind taking it personally? What are you telling yourself?
And everything that we notice, every thought that we have about, everything that Miriam has been suggesting, like prompts to pay attention to, all of those things are just like the objects in the room that I was referring to before. They're just other ways in which we put things in the space. And it's not wrong to put things in the space, but what Miriam is doing, a presence practice is just to become aware of what we put in the space. I can add one on top of that.
I'm just going to throw in a Bobby used breath. For example, Bobby used breath, and that's a very well-known presence practice, and everybody does it. They breathe,
That's right.
But very often we don't even notice what we're doing with our breath. And when we do start being asked or prompted to notice, we'll change the way we breathe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hold our breath or breathe, and it's almost like some people can't manage to relax the minute they start noticing their breath. So I was just wanting to bring that in, not to stop you, Fred, but just to mention that breath is also a very quick, easy one to do.
So here's kind of a fun one that it also kind of builds off of some well-known spiritual ideas. And it has to do with the phrase, I am. Most people probably are aware that phrase, it has all kinds of origins in scripture. Moses asked the burning bush, what should I call you? And I'm not sure I'm getting this exactly right, but essentially the burning bush says, I am that I am. In lots of Eastern traditions, they use phrases like, I am that, I am this. But I just want to focus on the phrase, I am, for a moment, because a lot of times you'll find in kind of metaphysical or new age type things, it's like we get very careful about what we add to the phrase, I am, because we use it like this manifesting kind of formula. But I want to slow that down a moment. I want to notice, much like Miriam and Bobby were sharing already, what is your experience in this moment? And so try adding I am to that. So if you notice that you're tense, just kind of affirm that to yourself. I am tense. And just notice what happens. You know, you could even get more precise, more grounded or concrete, as Miriam was saying. I am tense in my chest or in my neck. So you can be very specific. And just notice what happens when you own what your experience is in this moment. Instead of trying to fix it or change it or modify it in some way, just acknowledge where it is. And there's one more piece to that. This is another thing that I was just playing with recently, where we put a little space in there because, you know, I love space. So let's say you're angry about something and you're becoming aware of that. So you might say, I am, and then have a space of 4 or 5 seconds, and then add that last word, angry. And what I'm hoping, and we can try this ourselves, but what I'm hoping is by stating the phrase I am and then pausing, you sort of create the space in yourself. And then when you say the word angry or upset or wherever it may be, it sort of falls into that space. So we don't identify with it. We don't become the anger. We become the space in which the anger arises, which I believe is a much more accurate way to describe it. You know, the challenge that we have is that we often become identified with the experience. You know, it's like looking around the room and thinking that I'm a chair. But if we do that, so we don't, that's just silly to think I'm a chair. But when we think about anger or something, we just become anger. So by putting that little space, I am angry, somehow it allows us to see the anger as just an experience that occurs within this space. I am, just the words I am without anything additional, is like a declaration of being. I am. So if we could just start from that declaration of being and then just notice, what am I putting in that space of being right now? Because we'll almost always put something in there. So it's not very common that we're just living in pure being. But the more that we notice what we put in there, the more it brings us back to I am, and this is the stuff that I'm putting in that space. What about I am feeling angry? You know, try it for yourself. I wouldn't necessarily put a separation word in there, like feeling angry, you know? I would just let anger be what shows up in the space. I am angry. If I do, I am feeling angry, to me, it still feels like I'm the doer, like I'm creating the anger instead of just noticing that it shows up in the space. But try it for yourself and see how it works. I don't know.
That's
Go ahead,
always the
Bobby.
best advice, is try it for yourself, see how it works. And like for me, that doesn't work real well. And I know that's what you just suggested, Fred, the I am with the space. And I suspect the reason for that is in hypnosis, we're there's a phrase in hypnosis that reality is plastic, or perceived reality is plastic. It's malleable and we can change it. It's never too late to go back and have had a nice childhood.
Hmm.
But like if we're working with a smoker, what we want to do is help them rewire the way that they're seeing themselves. So I feel myself tripping up with that a little bit. And where my brain was going was to say, oh, I would like it better if he just said anger is arising. So, and then you did say that, and you said that's the way that I like it better. So in my head, I'm like, well, let's just go with that then.
Well,
But that, and well, my point is, and that's what's working for me
right
now. And
none of these should be the one way that everyone does.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that.
And some of these things are like little presence hacks and just tools that we can use. And for anybody that was listening to Fred go through that and thinking, oh my God, this is it. The fact that you got the "this is it" hit is telling you that that's a very good tool for you to use to enter presence right now. And if you had a similar reaction to what I did, not so much for you right now, but maybe in 6 months that may be the exact appropriate one. So
Right.
It's also recognizing what works for you based on how you're showing up right now, what you've been conditioned, how you have made your way through life thus far.
I noticed myself stopping at the am. There was nothing else to say.
Mhm.
It's just am. So for me, and I'm actually really fascinated with what I heard you say, Fred, about the doing. Because for me, actually, that's kind of essential. Noticing when I'm doing and when I'm being, and then falling back to the awareness and not staying in the doing unless I need to be doing. But even when I'm doing, I can be being.
Well,
And if anybody followed that,
you're
great.
always being, even when you're doing, but you get, maybe caught in the doing.
Yeah, well, there's the opportunity to be aware of the being in the doing, so that it's not just doing and being wrapped up in doing. So
And
I'm gonna put that comment in there. When I switch anger for love, I want it to be I am love. Well, that's that's actually kind of cool point. Thank you very much. Because for me, I'm just going to talk about how I really love that idea of whatever works for you. And for me, it's like, what does that feel like to you? What's it like if you're in the I am angry and that feels true? It doesn't matter whether it's I feel angry is arising. I mean, if it feels true for you in the moment, you can use that for something, right? That's telling you something, and being aware of that, allowing that to be in the space in whatever form and direction. I think there's no right or wrong. For me, it's more natural to feel angry than feel anger than be anger. If I'm being anger, I've identified with anger, and that says something about who I am, and that doesn't feel true to me. So I can feel anger and still be. And that feels true, to use that word.
Yeah.
And so anger arises in me. It does, yes, at times. So I think, and in the moment, and in the moment. It might be that whichever one of those suggestions might feel or appear to be or arise as true. So it doesn't always have to be I am anger, or anger is arising in me, or I feel anger. It doesn't always have to be. It can be one or the other, or even something else.
Yeah, the point of these practices is to notice where we are, presence, right? Our experience in this moment is whatever it is, and to acknowledge that, but hopefully not to acknowledge it in a way that just affirms that this is what's like this is who we are. Well, it depends on what we're affirming. Like maybe that was Rosalie, whoever said before, I am love. That's, beautiful, obviously, to affirm I am love. I wouldn't want to do it like as an escape from the anger or whatever I was feeling in that moment,
Yeah.
but just as a moment of recognizing, sitting here and saying, I am love. Sure. It's just acknowledging our, what's really true about us. So these practices, any variations on these can be used to further our awakening to what we really are. And sometimes they're needed, as Miriam was pointing out, in the busyness of our day, just to pause and to slow down and to just get present with what our experience is right now in this moment, which might be angry, or it might be, feeling a little like overwhelmed or whatever. And just acknowledge. See, when you say I am overwhelmed in that moment, especially if you do it with the pause, like I'm suggesting, you're just noticing what you're actually saying to yourself. So it's not, you didn't create the overwhelm by saying it. You're just acknowledging what's actually there in that moment for you.
I really like that, Fred.
And we're not resisting what is arising as well.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there, Mary.
No, you didn't cut me off. No, not at all. Hey, we're the Presence Posse. We have space. I like it. There's and speaking of space, presence is, and noticing a moment and a moment and a moment, it's always moving.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm angry, or I feel anger, or anger is arising in me in this moment, and then I'm not in this moment anymore. I'm in this moment, and then I'm in this moment. And part of the noticing, and this was actually really helpful to me, and why I like this idea of space, whichever one works for you, but the idea of I am space and then angry or whatever, is becoming aware of the attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, even when we talk about noticing the moment, it's noticing the moment. It is fluid. So there is not one moment. It's a moment. It's not getting attached to the moment, not being attached to the moment. I am love. I can't say that. Because that would also be, for me, like some sort of identity, or permanent being in some way. For some reason, to me, it doesn't
Feels
feel
limited.
It doesn't feel true. I stop at am.
Right.
And that's not saying that it's not true for someone, or not true in a moment. I'm just noticing it for me now. I am. And as I am, I'm noticing that everything is in motion. Even the space is in motion.
Everything is
Nothing is
changed.
static. So one of the beautiful things about presence practice that has been for me is not becoming attached or remaining attached to something. And that's sort of pointing back to the idea of identity. I'm a nice person, or I'm a mean person, or I'm not good enough, or I'm wonderful, or whatever. It's Yeah, in any given moment, I'm one or all of those things. And in a moment, and in the next moment, I am or feel or something arises that is else. But I always am,
You always
or at
am.
least am.
You always is.
I always is. And I mean, we can have a discussion, which we've had before in Presence Posse Talks, the idea of I and self, but we don't have a language that expresses not I
Right.
being.
Yeah.
Right. There's no possible way for you to not be.
Yeah. Whatever
Being
you is.
whatever that, well, the you might cease to exist, but the being is already present, you know? Like that's like when I mean space, I mean being. It's like those two words are synonymous. So I show up in that space of being for a little while, and then I as this will eventually leave, will be gone, but the space of being has not left.
Mhm.
The space of being doesn't live or isn't born with me and doesn't die with me. That's the Zen koan. What was your original face before you were born? Is it points to the being that existed before you came into this world.
Bobby, would you like to add to that?
Not specifically to that, but I do have something that is popping up for me during all of this that I want to share is regardless of how we let this particular exercise unfold, whether we are I am with a pause or just the I am, or if we're doing the anger or whatever is arising, that can also be a good little point for a little self-exploration and something that you could use, like if frustration is arising or if I am frustrated, to just explore what story are you telling yourself in order for that emotion to arise. And this isn't something that needs to become deep psychoanalysis. One of the things that I've been playing with over this weekend is I have a big presentation coming up on Wednesday, and I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that. And, hope has arisen that, this will unfold exactly the way I'm dreaming it will. And blue skies and sunshine will await. At other times, I've been thinking, I'm not prepared for this. And nervousness is arising in me. And I'll play with both of those. With the blue skies and sunshine, I'll play with that by saying, okay, am I hanging my future happiness on the outcome of this particular meeting? Is my happiness in any way dependent on that? And I've done this enough that I very quickly get no. That is irrelevant to my happiness. And I know that if I'm already in a nice, happy space, and a calm and peaceful space, the likelihood that I'm going to do well in the presentation goes way up. When anxiousness is arising, I notice a couple of things. One is it's arising, and I'm anxious about that. And I'm like, okay, what's the story that I'm telling myself? Well, the story that I'm telling myself is I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to fall flat on my face. I'm going to be covered in flop sweat. I know that that's unlikely to happen, but I also can see that there's a thread in there telling me you're not as prepared as you ought to be be well. So there's wisdom in there telling me get a little bit more prepared, which I have on my agenda for today at 3:00 my time. And so one thing that's done for me is once I got that on the books, and for me, I did need to enter it into my time schedule. It's not something that's required to do. It's just what worked for me. The moment that I started getting anxious, and I knew I needed to prepare more. And I set that 2-hour block aside to do that. Now, all of a sudden, when anxiousness arose, it's like, yeah, I know, I got it. 3 o'clock on Monday is when we're going to be doing this. And now for me, the anxiousness has arisen. So, it's a kind of a complex method, and I'm happy to clarify it if it was confusing the way I explained it, of just bringing me back to the moment, recognizing out in the future something's going to happen and there's going to be an event that happens before that. And for me, it just allows me to stay, I'm calm. Yep, I got the message. The wisdom's still coming through. You need to work on it. You need to work on it. And I just keep responding. I won't forget. I won't forget. Kind of helps keep
just to
me here and now.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, Bobby, for those of you who are watching, since you mentioned, if there's anybody who didn't quite understand or would like to have that explained one more time, please let us know in the comments, and then we can have a second try at it. Any of these that you've heard, I mean, if you find them valuable and you need a bit, can you run that by us one more time? We are, of course, happy to do so, and I'm choosing to speak for you guys. Let's see what Malcolm has to say. I am is the preparatory command for the brain. I was just going to bring the brain in. That's really funny. What comes after the pause is the command of action. 3 to 5 second pause is necessary.
The method behind the madness, the science behind the method.
Yes.
The madness behind the method.
The madness behind the method. I was just going to mention, it's nice that Malcolm brought up brain, because I was actually going to say something about brain, and I was going to say Malcolm will probably like this. In when I was researching my first master's thesis, or writing my first master's thesis, I wrote a little bit about what was called states of being. And we've talked a little bit about, or I've mentioned anyway, identity, and even some other habits like Fred, you were talking about, we generally focus on things, for example. And then there's sort of the wording of what suits us, what feels more, just to use the word true or now or whatever for us, whether it's I am or I feel or whatever's arising or whatever your style is. States of being, if I feel angry, and I feel angry often, and I perhaps am triggered by something, or allow myself to be triggered by something again and again and again, so that anger arises again and again and again, that creates a loop, a pattern. And it can be so I almost started speaking another language.
Yeah.
That wouldn't help much. It can be over a long period of time, such that I give the impression, you know how you notice some people and go, oh, he's a really angry person. Or, oh, she's a really whatever, lazy person or something, where you have the idea of that they are like that. That's what's meant by state of being. And it's basically something that we consciously or unconsciously have practiced. And it becomes a way of life, a way of who we are, or how we are in the world. And freeing ourselves of that state of being can be actually quite simple. And that is by using these presence practices and noticing, I am.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to use you and also Bobby, whichever form of anger is arising or has arisen, because very often if it's a state of being, you're there before you even notice. So anger has arisen and I let it go, for example. Anger has arisen and I'm noticing what I'm thinking and how I'm creating that state in myself. And I'm noticing I don't have to do that anymore. For example. So just to know, like, we're talking about owning an identity and presence being, or moments being fluid. It's not one, it's moment. There is all the same this possible experience of being, which is actually a state of being. because I've been practicing a certain way of being for a long time. So it seems to be me. Like some people that I hate myself because I'm whatever. It's probably a pattern, a learned response to something that creates a state of being that gives the impression, oh, she's really nice, or oh, she's a jerk, or whatever. And that's not it. So just know that it might feel permanent. It might feel like it's that way, or you are that person. And that's not what's happening. It's a way of being, it's a state of being, and it is also in motion and can be moved even more by becoming more present and practicing becoming aware and present of each moment. I knew he was going to say that. For those of you who don't know, Malcolm Free is a member of the Presence Posse, and he is our resident neuro guy. He's everything brain, and we love him. So thank you, Malcolm, for commenting on that. We are actually, boy, that went fast towards the end of our hour. Would either of you like to say anything in particular, either about what you do, what you offer, or anything more about presence practices?
I have a couple of quick closing words about presence practices. My objective here, and when I share these here, or when we share them with clients or whatever, is to make it into a game. Please, God, don't make this serious and intense and like some other thing that I have to master. And, because guess what? Then it just becomes another doing, and it becomes like your ego grabs it and tries to use it to feel good about itself. And look how wonderful I am. I'm so present. And we get caught in our own web very quickly. And very often play is the answer. So just play with being more present. Play with any of the things that we've shared here today. Make up your own, which is real play, and have fun with this. Enjoy it, and just see where it takes you. Because, like, Miriam's talking about the brain. This is how we build new neural pathways, by constantly shifting our habitual perspective, our habitual way of thinking, until the brain says, oh, this must be important. I'll build some pathways for this perspective now.
That's
Beautiful.
huge.
Others?
Yeah, that's huge, Fred. Yeah, it's interesting that we have been doing this for almost a year and a half. And this is really the first podcast that we've dedicated toward practices or techniques. And I think from my point of view, at least, it's a pushback against the conditioning, which is that we always have to be doing something. And there's a Franz Kafka quote that I'll share with you in a second that I love, that preaches the exact opposite. But there is it is our conditioning that, we should be doing something. So, checking in with our breath, or meditating, or sitting in the lotus position, or, going on a walk can be the new thing that we have to do so that we can be the way that we want to be. And what we normally are focused on here is that you can be that way anytime that you want to. In fact, you cannot not be that way, other than by creating all of these things on top of our pure essence, which is peaceful presence, unconditioned love. And it helps to use whatever shows up for you as a way to play around with these concepts and just practice being present in the moment. And that can become a new habit. As Fred said, our brain will naturally start to create new neural pathways. And that's what I mentioned earlier with the breath. that, people generally within a shortness of 7 to 10 days, a longness of 30 to 40 days, will begin to notice if they get into the habit, that begins to send a message to the brain, to the internal pharmacy, to our nervous system. This is a time to be calm and relaxed and just be in the moment. So let me share this Franz Kafka quote. He said, "You need not leave your room."
Mhm.
You do not need to leave your room. I'm sorry. You do not need to leave your room. Remain sitting at your table and listen. You need not even listen. Simply wait. You need not even wait. Just be still, quiet, and solitary. The world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. It will roll in ecstasy at your feet. And that's one of my favorite quotes. In fact, I had a gift one time. Somebody had that quote printed on a nice little cuff, just a reminder that peace and love and presence and joy and happiness is our true nature. It is our being at rest. It is our human doing at rest. So take that for what it's worth and play around with it and just see what hacks or tricks resonate with you to get yourself more frequently in the moment. How about you, Miriam, in closing?
Thank you, Bobby. Well, on the idea of doing and conditioning, speaking generally, I can say, I dare say, the majority of us are trained to do and do and do and do. And when we, many of us anyway, come into being, when we come into being and come into the moment and the moment and the moment, I've heard many people like, oh, I don't want to be present washing my dishes. Why should I do that? It's boring. Or being present, like I heard you describing in the Kafka quote, how the world will unfold. It's like, yeah, but that's boring.
Mhm.
When we're conditioned that things go quickly, when we're conditioned to live in speed and many things happening, it might feel boring. When we're conditioned to think we have to, whatever, we have to be doing something because that says something about our self-worth. You're a good boy if you're a good girl if you do, or look like, or act like. All of that is doing. Then anything other than that, than the conditioning, the state of being in which you feel comfortable, anything other than that may feel uncomfortable, for example, boring or scary. Being present, just being, is really exciting. Often. There's so much in a moment. And I was one of those people that was 100 miles an hour and didn't see the point of this presence thing. And fortunately started meditating in my teens and realized that there was a whole world out there that I wasn't noticing, and a whole person in here who wasn't living when I was so busy doing and running around and looking at everything else instead of being in me, being in the world, being. So I invite you to be with boring and give it a try. Try boring. You might find out that boring ain't so boring after all.
Try boring.
Try boring. There might be a few nice Christmas presents under that particular tree, and you might find some lovely surprises. in being in that moment or any moment. So, and you're, of course, more than welcome to refuse my invitation. So I will end with thanking both of you lovely gentlemen for being with me today.
Thank
as
you,
we
lovely
present
Marianne, as well.
Thank you, the Presence Posse as we ride again and present presence practices. I learned a lot from you, and I hope all of you who have been watching and who will watch the replay will learn something from us. And we are happy to hear from you in your comments and ask us our questions. And let us know if you'd like us to bring up a topic, because we're always looking for topics to do with presence. Maybe you're wondering about something, or you have actually discovered something and you would like to talk about it with us also.
Yeah.
So we will be back next week for another round of the Presence Posse. We will be presenting a new topic. I have no idea what that's going to be. So just stay tuned and in our free group, the Presence Posse, to find out. Thanks again, everybody who's been watching as well and joined us with your questions and comments. And as Mike Malcolm says, closing, tell a friend or two about us, or 3 or 4. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.